Welcome, friend. Come in, come in. You're just in time. I was about to open the book. Which book, you ask? The book of tales that will chill you a little and thrill you a little. I know how much you enjoy these stories as you drift off to sleep. Don't forget to follow us and share these tales with others. Now, turn your light off, lie back, as we journey together into darkness.
The glass garden. The rain pattered softly against the glass walls, a soothing rhythm that temporarily drowned out the muffled sobs. Evelyn huddled on the worn floral sofa, her knees pulled tight to her chest, as she gazed out at the lush, verdant growth that surrounded her. This small greenhouse, her sanctuary, was the only place she felt safe, the only place where she could escape the constant disparagement and cruelty of her husband. It had been raining for days, a seemingly endless downpour that matched her melancholy mood. Thick droplets slid down the glass, obscuring the world beyond, and Evelyn found herself grateful for the isolation. Out there, in the expansive manor that served as their home, her husband Gilbert would be pacing like a caged animal, his temper growing more volatile with each passing hour. She knew it was only a matter of time before he sought her out, his beady eyes narrowed in accusation, his thin lips twisted into a sneer. Useless, emotional woman, he would spit, his bony fingers curling into fists. Can't even tend to a simple garden without ruining everything. Evelyn winced, the phantom sting of his backhand still haunting her cheek. It had been 3 days since his last outburst, 3 days of relative peace, but the respite never lasted. Gilbert's rage came in unpredictable bursts, sparked by the slightest perceived slight or imperfection. And Evelyn, meek and frightened, could never predict which action or inaction would ignite his fury. She reached out, tracing a finger along the delicate petals of a nearby orchid. This one, at least, had survived his latest rampage, its purple blooms unfurling in defiance. Evelyn smiled faintly, taking solace in the resilience of her plants. They, unlike her, knew how to weather the storms. With a heavy sigh, she rose from the sofa, her joints aching from hours spent curled in on herself. The greenhouse, while her sanctuary, was still a space that belonged to Gilbert, his domain, his passion. He had built this oasis with his own hands, surrounding it with lush gardens that showcased his botanical expertise. And he lorded that power over Evelyn, using it to demean and control her. "You couldn't grow weeds if your life depended on it," he would sneer, kicking at the soil in disgust. "I don't know why I let you anywhere near my plants." Evelyn shuddered, the memory of his words like a physical blow. She moved closer to the orchid, running her fingers along its leaves in a silent act of defiance. This was her space too, damn it. Her haven, her one true joy in this gilded prison she called a life. Movement caught her eye, and she turned to see a small sparrow hopping along the windowsill. It paused, cocking its head as if sensing her gaze, then fluttered away into the rainy gloom. Evelyn felt a pang of envy. How she wished she could spread her wings and escape this place, this life, as easily as that little bird. But she was trapped, bound by the constraints of her gender and the weight of social expectations. Gilbert was a renowned botanist, his work celebrated and revered. To leave him would be to invite ruin, ostracization. Where would she go? What would she do? The thought of facing the world alone, without the protection of her husband's name, was a terrifying prospect. And so she remained, withering beneath Gilbert's constant derision, clinging to the hope that one day, somehow, things would change. Perhaps if she could prove her worth, demonstrate her abilities as a gardener, he would see her as more than just a burden, an emotional liability. Evelyn moved further into the greenhouse, trailing her fingers along the lush foliage. She paused before a particularly striking plant. Its deep crimson leaves shot through with veins of golden yellow. This was her latest creation, a hybrid she had been carefully cultivating for months. Gilbert, of course, knew nothing about it. She had stumbled upon the rare and exotic species by chance, coming across a single, weather-worn seed pod during one of her rare forays into the nearby woods. Intrigued, she had carefully nurtured the delicate seedling, lavishing it with attention and care. And as the plant flourished, so too did Evelyn's sense of pride and accomplishment. This was hers, her own private triumph, untainted by Gilbert's scorn. She had pored over botanical texts, experimenting with pollination techniques and soil compositions, until finally the stunning hybrid had emerged. Its vibrant leaves and heady, sweet fragrance were a testament to her skill, her dedication. Evelyn ran her fingers along the plant's stem, feeling a surge of protectiveness. Gilbert would never understand the artistry, the nuance, that went into cultivating such a marvel. To him, it would be just another one of her failed experiments, another thing for him to mock and destroy. The thought of him trampling this precious creation, his brutish hands tearing it to shreds, made Evelyn's stomach twist with nausea. She wouldn't allow it. This plant, this beautiful, unique specimen, was hers and hers alone. A small seed of defiance took root within her, blossoming into a steely determination. She would protect her creation, no matter the cost. The days dragged on, the rain showing no sign of letting up. Evelyn spent most of her time sequestered in the greenhouse, tending to her plants and strategizing ways to conceal her prized hybrid from Gilbert's prying eyes. She knew it was only a matter of time before he would venture out to inspect his domain, and the thought filled her with a growing sense of dread. When the knock finally came, it was like the toll of a funeral bell. Evelyn froze, her heart hammering in her chest, as Gilbert's gruff voice carried through the glass. "Evelyn, are you out here, you useless woman?" She took a deep, steadying breath, then moved to unlock the door. Better to face him head-on than to cower and risk further punishment. Gilbert swept in. His dark eyes narrowed in displeasure. "There you are. I should have known you'd be hiding in your little greenhouse." He sneered the last word, as if the very concept offended him. Evelyn kept her gaze lowered, her fingers twisting nervously in the hem of her dress. "I'm sorry, Gilbert. I was just—" Wasting time as usual. He waved a dismissive hand, already turning to inspect the plants. "Well, let's see what damage you've managed to inflict this time." Evelyn watched in silent horror as he moved through the greenhouse, his bony fingers prodding and grabbing at the delicate foliage. She winced with each harsh touch, her nails digging into her palms as she fought the urge to intervene. And then he paused, his gaze fixing on the crimson-leafed hybrid. Evelyn held her breath, praying he would simply move on, but Gilbert's eyes narrowed, and she knew her secret had been discovered. "What is this?" he demanded, reaching out to grasp the plant's stem. Evelyn steeled herself, then stepped forward. "It's a new hybrid I've been working on. Hybrid?" Gilbert scoffed, his grip tightening. "You think you have the skill to create something like this? Don't be ridiculous." The plant's leaves rustled in protest, and Evelyn's heart clenched. "Please, Gilbert, don't." But it was too late. With a savage twist, he wrenched the stem from the soil, sending the plant tumbling to the ground. Evelyn let out a strangled cry, dropping to her knees beside the broken, wilting form. "No, no, no," she whimpered, cradling the precious hybrid in her trembling hands. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she watched the vibrant leaves curl and brown, the life draining from the plant with each passing moment. Gilbert loomed over her, his thin lips curled in a sneer. "Pathetic. I told you, you're incapable of caring for anything." He tossed the severed stem at her feet. "Clean this up before I have to look at it any longer." With that, he turned and strode out of the greenhouse, leaving Evelyn alone with her ruined creation and her shattered dreams. Time seemed to slow to a crawl as Evelyn knelt there, her vision blurred by tears. The rain pounded steadily against the glass, the once soothing rhythm now a mocking accompaniment to her grief. She gently brushed her fingers along the dying leaves, her heart shattering with each withered, crumbling petal. This had been her triumph, her one small victory in the endless battle against Gilbert's cruelty, and he had crushed it, snuffed it out without a second thought, just as he had crushed her own spirit, time and time again. Anger, hot and fierce, began to smoulder within her. How dare he? How dare he waltz in and destroy the only thing that brought her any measure of joy or fulfillment? This was her sanctuary, her domain, and he had violated it without a shred of remorse. Evelyn carefully placed the broken plant back in its pot, her trembling hands clenching into fists at her sides. Enough. Enough of this endless torment, this soul-crushing subjugation. She was no longer willing to be his victim, his plaything. If he would not respect her, if he would not even allow her this small sliver of autonomy, then she would take matters into her own hands. The plan formed in her mind with a clarity that took her breath away. It was bold, it was risky, but in that moment, Evelyn knew with unwavering certainty that it was her only path to freedom. She would create a new hybrid, one more potent, more deadly than anything Gilbert had ever encountered, and she would use it to deliver the ultimate retribution. In the days that followed, Evelyn threw herself into her work with a single-minded focus. She pored over botanical texts, cross-referencing obscure species and studying the properties of various toxins. Her hands moved with a steady, practiced grace as she carefully pollinated her plants, coaxing forth a new, more sinister creation. Gilbert, oblivious to her machinations, continued his routine of sporadic visits to the greenhouse. He would stalk the aisles, his beady eyes narrowed in criticism, muttering under his breath about Evelyn's incompetence. But she no longer flinched at his harsh words, her attention fixed firmly on the task at hand. The new hybrid flourished under her attentive care, its leaves growing larger and more vibrant with each passing day. Evelyn marveled at its resilience, its ability to thrive even in the face of Gilbert's frequent tirades. It was as if the plant itself sensed her determination, her thirst for vengeance, and drew strength from it. Finally, the day came when the first blooms unfurled, their sweet, heady scent filling the greenhouse. Evelyn brushed her fingers along the petals, a grim smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. This was it, the culmination of her plan. With a careful snip, she harvested several of the flowers, their nectar glistening like liquid rubies. The next morning, Evelyn prepared Gilbert's tea with a steady hand, adding a generous measure of the toxic nectar. She watched impassively as he drank it down, oblivious to the deadly concoction. It was only a matter of time now. As the day wore on, Gilbert began to exhibit the first signs of distress. His skin grew pale and clammy, his breathing laboured. Evelyn, feigning concern, urged him to lie down, all the while suppressing a triumphant smile. By nightfall, Gilbert was delirious, his body racked by convulsions. Evelyn remained at his side, her fingers clasped around a cup of the poisoned tea, ready to administer another dose if necessary. She would not let him escape this fate, not after all he had done to her. When his laboured breathing finally ceased, Evelyn exhaled a long, shuddering sigh. It was over. The tyrant was gone, his reign of cruelty extinguished. She allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction, then set about implementing the next phase of her plan. Under the cover of darkness, Evelyn dragged Gilbert's lifeless body out to the greenhouse, his limbs limp and cold. With considerable effort, she dug a shallow grave beneath the towering hybrid, then carefully lowered him into the earth. As she covered him with soil, she whispered a final, scathing rebuke. "Now you can nourish something worthwhile, you wretched man." In the days that followed, Evelyn tended to the hybrid with a renewed fervour, her heart swelling with pride as it continued to thrive. The plant's vibrant leaves seemed to grow even more lush, its blooms larger and more fragrant than ever before. Evelyn knew with a deep, unsettling certainty that Gilbert's remains were feeding the plant, fueling its remarkable growth. She would often sit among the verdant foliage, running her fingers along the velvety leaves as she gazed out at the world beyond the greenhouse. The rain had finally ceased, and sunlight streamed through the glass, illuminating the space with a warm, golden glow. Evelyn felt a sense of peace, of freedom, that she had never known before. No longer would she cower in fear, no longer would she be subjected to Gilbert's cruel tyranny. This was her domain now, her sanctuary, and she would nurture it with the same care and devotion she had lavished upon her plants. As the days turned into weeks, Evelyn's creation continued to flourish, its vibrant blooms unfurling with each passing day. And deep beneath the soil, Gilbert's remains fed the roots, nourishing the plant with his very essence. Evelyn smiled, a profound sense of satisfaction washing over her. The glass garden, as she had come to call it, was a testament to her strength, her resilience, and her unwavering determination. It was a symbol of her triumph over the man who had sought to break her, a living embodiment of the justice she had so carefully, so meticulously served. And as Evelyn tended to her creation, her heart filled with a newfound sense of purpose, she knew that she would never again be cowed, never again be subjected to the whims of a tyrannical master. For in this verdant oasis, she was the one who held the power, the one who decided the fate of all that grew within. The rain may have stopped, but the glass garden continued to thrive, a living, breathing monument to Evelyn's defiance and the price that had been paid for her freedom.